Okay, I'm fairly certain most of y'all know what Power Rangers is. How in 1992, Saban Entertainment created a series that basically spliced together action sequences from a Japanese Super Sentai show called Kyoru Sentai Ranger, along with normal footage that was shot here in the United States.
It wasn't the first interaction Sentai would have with America, far from it actually, as many of the early Super Sentai series aired on KIKU, an independent television station based on Honolulu that specialized in Japanese and Filipino programming. This would include the original Sentai series, Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger, and Battle Fever J, the latter of which was originally supposed to feature Marvel's Captain America as a member. 1986 marked the first attempt Saban Entertainment made at adapting Super Sentai as they attempted to bring Jodenchi Bioman to the United States. Around the same time, there was a comedic dub of another earlier Sentai series, Kangaku Sentai Dynaman, that aired on the USA Cable Network as part of an anthology series called Night Flight.
Saban would make one more attempt in the early 1990s by adapting the series Chojin Sentai Jetman into an American show. However, about partway through, they pivoted over to the dinosaur-themed Kyoru Sentai Ranger for reasons that remain a mystery to this very day.
There would be some changes. The Jew Rangers were ancient warriors revived in the modern day, each representing different tribes of an ancient race. The Power Rangers, on the other hand, were just American teenagers with varying degrees of martial arts training. And most notable of all, the Yellow Jew Ranger boy was a male, while the Yellow Power Ranger, Trini Kwan, played by the late Thuy Trang, was a female, which explains why 13-year-old me was always confused that the Girl Rangers suddenly lost a lot of, definition in their morph mode.
Again, I was 13. Anyway, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers would go on to become a phenomenon, then the cornerstone television show of the daily Fox Network Kids programming block. It would run for 3 seasons and a theatrical movie adapting 2 other Sentai series, Gosei Sentai Dai Ranger and Ninja Sentai Kaka Ranger, along the way. It would eventually just kind of morph into the Power Rangers franchise, each adopting a different Super Sentai theme with different costumes and many times different characters, outside of one season where they remastered the original Mighty Morphin episodes with weird comic book-like effects.
Speaking of comic books, there were Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics, starting with Hamilton Comics in the early 90s, which then shortly moved over to Marvel Comics in 1995, around the time of the theatrical movie. The license would bounce around a few other places until 2015 when it found a new home at Boom Studios.
That series would go back to the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers roots, picking up from the definitive storyline in the show's history, Green with Evil, that saw the introduction of the 6th Ranger, Tommy Oliver, played by the late Jason David Frank. Tommy would be introduced as the evil 6th Ranger under the control of Sorceress Rita Repulsa before rebelling and joining the team. The story arc that we're covering today literally picks up in the aftermath of Tommy rebelling and joining the Power Rangers. This is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Volume 1.
Tommy is oddly silent as Jason gives him a ride to Angel Grove High. He may be out from Rita's control, but he isn't completely free of the Sorceress, as her ghost continuously taunts him about the other Power Rangers never really trusting him. This continues as the two meet up with the other Rangers, with Tommy keeping silent as Kimberly attempts to flirt with him. Back at Bondora Palace, Rita has Finster put the finishing touches on a new monster that doesn't even need her magic to grow into a giant form. It attacks just as Kimberly attempts cheering Tommy up via text message on his BlackBerry?
Wait a minute, this thing came out in 2015. No one was using Blackberries at that point. Then again, the idea of the Rangers having smartphones in general just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, as I tend to think of this show as being quintessentially 90s and not set in contemporary times.
The Rangers morph while the school evacuates and immediately call their Zords. The Megazord is formed as Tommy ignores Jason's request to sit back and formulate another plan by jumping into action immediately with his Megazord as Rita's continuous taunting happens the entire time. However, the monster has an armor plate on its chest that deflects any of Tommy's attacks. Finally, the Megazord puts the creature in a full Nelson, allowing the Dragon Zord to run the monster through with its drill tail. Unfortunately, this is immediately followed by Tommy losing control of his Zord and taking out a nearby bridge. Kimberly breaks off her Pterodactyl Zord to catch any following cars and get them to safety. Back at the command center, Zordon and the other Rangers confront Tommy about what happened and why he didn't follow the plan to begin with. Zordon takes both Tommy and Jason to task, the former for being so headstrong and charging in uninformed, and the latter for not being clear in his plans and making things confusing. Still, all this does is seem to fuel Tommy's doubts. Meanwhile, Rita and Scorpina look through Angel Grove Bay until they locate a crystal that Rita says is the next phase of her plan.
Like I said earlier, Rita Repulsa is the main villain of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, or to be precise, the first season. But she is an evil sorceress who once fought the original Rangers alongside Zordon until they trapped Rita and her minions inside an interdimensional dumpster where they remained until the start of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series. Now, Rita operates out of a moon-based headquarters called Bondora's Palace. This is a reference to her character's name in Jew Ranger. Alongside her minions, Squat and Babu, Monster Maker Finster, and Chief Fighters Goldar and Scorpina, the latter of which appeared sporadically throughout the show, to the point that I honestly thought the character had died at some point.
Bulk and Skull began working on their YouTube show about the Rangers, focusing on the recent addition of the Green Ranger to the team, and whether or not he can be trusted due to his former villain status. Opinions are mixed, especially after the incident with the bridge, but Jason and Kimberly do come to the Green Ranger's defense, as well as several others, except for Tommy, who's oddly silent on the matter. That being said, it doesn't appear that things are on the up and up as the group meets for lunch, and Zach begins voicing some private doubts that he has about Tommy possibly being free of Rita's magic. The others, except for Kimberly, are also silent on this issue as Tommy arrives cutting class, only for the others to kind of clear out with Billy and Trini heading off to run some diagnostic scans on the Dragon Zord. Back at Bondora Palace, Rita explains the crystal is part of the original material used to make the Green Ranger's power coin and dagger, all of which is fueled by chaotic green energy, and thus can feed on more, like say the growing chaos between the Rangers. After a training session at the command center, and declining Kimberly's invite for coffee, Tommy heads back home to take a nap, only to be confronted in his bedroom by Scorpina.
And 1 million fanfics were just launched by that very scene.
Back at the command center, Billy and Trini run their diagnostic scan on the Dragon Zord and talk about their feelings about Tommy. Billy admits not having much of a connection with Tommy, who's just another good-looking, athletic person, like all the other Rangers get to be. Trini points out that Billy contributes in his own way, and that he doesn't necessarily need to be a fighter like everyone else. Also, he's not such a bad looker himself.
Not for Trini, though. She eventually just hooks up with Zach in a later comic.
Tommy teleports he and Scorpina out to an empty part of town to protect his family, only for his communicator to get smashed along the way. Thankfully, he can still probably contact the other Rangers on his smartphone. He manages to morph just before getting jumped by several of Rita's foot soldiers, the Putties. For Tommy's benefit, however, the destruction of the communicator does allow the others to be alerted to the attack. Kimberly and Jason arrive to provide aid to Tommy, as Scorpina teleports away and Tommy takes off after her in hot pursuit as Rita's ghost continues to taunt him. The others catch up and try talking him down, but he's still upset, especially since his family could have been in danger. The team head back to the command center in Zordon, where Billy explains that the Dragon Zord just won't listen to Tommy anymore. This causes more taunting from Rita's ghost, which allows Tommy to finally snap before suddenly passing out. Tommy wakes up in his home, where his mother explains the others dropped him off, only for her to then let loose that she knows that they are Power Rangers, and revealing that it's actually Rita in disguise.
Once again, 1 million fanfics were launched by that very scene.
Tommy comes to in the command center while Trini suggests undergoing a power scan while Kimberly fetches some water for him. Back at Bondora Palace, Rita's crystal begins glowing as she sacrifices one of her putties to make a new dragon dagger for the next phase of her plan. Trini slides Tommy into the scanning chamber as the two bond while she points out that her father fled an oppressive regime in Taiwan, where he had committed many atrocities as a soldier. So she understands what it's like to try to forget a dark past, much like he's trying to do.
It's nice to see Tommy and Trini interact like this, as I don't remember anything on the show happening in that type of manner. I mean, those characters just didn't work together that much. Probably due to the fact that the producers were trying to push the Kimberly-Tommy ship and they didn't want anything to distract from it.
It's then that the command center is attacked by the Dragon Zord and all of the other Rangers are completely slaughtered. Trini morphs and calls her Saber-Tooth Tiger Zord, only for it too to get destroyed. Tommy tries to talk down the Dragon Zord and play the flute part of his dagger, only to suddenly be eaten. Obviously, this is just another dream, but one that won't launch any other fanfics. Trini begins looking at the scan and realizes something. She explains to Zord and the others that Tommy's power scaling bounces all over the place, meaning that his powers aren't directly connected to the morphing grid. It's enough for Tommy to finally talk about the visits he's been having from Rita. However, in a rather surprising move, he doesn't exactly get much support from everyone, especially Jason and Zach, as they are disappointed that he kept it a secret all this time. This all gets interrupted by the actual activation of the Dragon Zord by Scorpina, who's managed to commandeer the giant creature utilizing her counterfeit dagger. Jason tells Tommy to stay behind until he can learn to handle things as part of an actual team. The Rangers morph and call for their Zords to individually try to restrain the purloined dragon. His attempts to drag the Dragon Zord back out to the bay is thwarted by the sudden appearance of several giant shark monsters from Rita and Finster.
As this is playing out, longtime Ranger frenemies, Bulk and Skull, kidnap one of Rita's putty soldiers so that they can beat it up in Ranger cosplay in front of Kimberly and Trini, hopefully impressing them. I think this was meant to be like a backstory that ran through the issues, but it's all crammed in the last part of the book for some reason, and it really makes the whole thing feel out of place.
As the Zord battle begins turning against the Rangers, Rita once again appears to Tommy to begin taunting him. However, he's had enough and says that she doesn't control him anymore as he morphs and asks to be teleported onto the Dragon Zord. He starts trying to regain it by playing his flute, only for Scorpina to shrug him off. Thankfully, Kimberly uses her pterodactyl Zord to catch Tommy and guide him into the dragon's eye, where he crashes into the cockpit and begins brawling with Scorpina. Tommy manages to gain the upper hand and smash the counterfeit dragon dagger, allowing him to regain control of the Dragon Zord. Scorpina is taken hostage and the Megazord kills the giant shark monsters. However, things are not exactly hunky-dory as Jason is still upset with Tommy for disobeying orders once again. That being said, things are not exactly hunky-dory as Jason is still upset with Tommy for disobeying orders again. Zach also steps in while the others try to calm everyone down, leading to a massive argument breaking out amongst the Rangers, which makes the crystal from the counterfeit dagger begin growing even brighter until it eventually explodes. The next thing the Rangers see is a large Zord-like being smashing into the command center ready to fight the Rangers.
And yeah, that's how this ends, on a cliffhanger. I mean, other than that Bulk and Skull thing I talked about earlier. So yeah, that concludes Volume 1 of Boom's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series. How was it? Well, I do really like a lot of the characterization from this. I kind of like how it kind of toys with ideas from the series. Like, Tommy isn't automatically accepted. In fact, he's feeling awkward about his past. So it's not like, oh, he's a member of the group now, everything's all good and dandy. Again, I like the fact that these teenagers are portrayed like actual teenagers, whereas in the show they were, pretty much just, goody two-shoes who did everything right and were perfect in every way. Yeah, again, it shows them to be more like, real people with real problems that, again, pan out like that. I mentioned the Trini-Tommy scene earlier. You didn't see those characters interact much on the show. It was kind of interesting to see stuff like that happen. And overall, I think the artwork is pretty nice. The story itself is interesting to a point. It does get a little repetitive in some aspects, but like I said, overall, that part works. If I have a problem with it, again, it's, like I mentioned earlier, the setting things in contemporary times. Why do the Rangers have wrist communicators if they have smartphones? Exactly. Like, you're making things look unnecessarily clunky just to try it. I understand the idea of maybe trying to make things relatable, but if you were making a Happy Days comic in the 1970s, you wouldn't have the Fonz playing Atari. Or, or if you're doing, the Wonder Years in the 80s, or something like that, like a Wonder Years comic, you wouldn't have, Kevin Arnold, going skateboarding in a half pipe. Like, you wouldn't do that because that did not exist at that time. That's just kind of how I feel. It just makes it feel a little clunky. I mean, a little bit with, like, Bulk and Skull doing their YouTube show. Okay, that maybe works a little bit better. Like, they had a school TV channel, so you could have easily worked that instead of YouTube. So I think that part really would have worked. And also, to another extent,
also, there's the little Bulk and Skull backup story thing. Like I said, that's just too jarring to be crammed into the end, especially after a big cliffhanger. So, yeah, I really wish this had been like just a little subplot running throughout the narrative. instead of, say, like I said, its own backup story or even just its own miniseries. I think it would have worked a lot better rather than trying to be part of something bigger and it just not really working. And like I said, being way too much of a jarring transition.
It gets a little, like I said, the story gets a little repetitive. I mean, we have Zach mentioning like 3 or 4 times that he doesn't really fully trust Tommy. Like, okay, we get it. You said it once, you really don't need to say it multiple times. And again, I think that just leads to a little bit of clunkiness. I'm not entirely sure what the villain's idea was sometimes. Like, I had to go back and reread scenes over and over again. Uh, like, at one point, Rita says the crystal was what the dragon dagger is made out of, but then you see what the dragon dagger is being made out of the putty. So, again, like, sometimes there's those little contravening points that just kind of get in the way of this. So yeah, overall, it's not bad. I do kind of enjoy it. I am going to get, especially if you're a big Power Rangers fan, but if you're new to this, you're probably just better off watching the old show. Anyway, I'm going to give Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Volume 1 a B. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP Time for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.